Hello and happy St. Patrick's Day.
They're always after me, Lucky Charms.
In honor of today, I'm going to be talking about one of the most notorious Irish-American gangsters in American history, George Machine Gun Kelly. Not that one. Born George Kelly Barnes on July 18th, 1895, he was part of a wealthy family living in Memphis, Tennessee. His youth was largely uneventful, with his first signs of trouble occurring when he would go off to college at Mississippi State to study agriculture in 1917. During this time, he was considered to be a poor student, with the highest grade he would get being a C+ for good personal hygiene, which isn't that big of a thing considering that he only got a C+ in it.
Wash your nasty ass.
Is that all, mama?
During this time, he would get in trouble with the faculty so much that he spent most of his time working off demerits that he would get. His time in college wasn't all that bad though, considering that he would ultimately end up meeting a woman named Geneva Ramsey. They would fall in love and ultimately end up quitting school to get married. Must have won her over with that C+ in good hygiene. The couple ended up having 2 children, and George would work as a cab driver in Memphis in an attempt to support his family. However, the job wasn't making enough for him to do this, so he ended up quitting in an attempt to find a job that would. The situation put so much strain on his family that by the time he was 19, he was without steady work and a wife. At this time, he ended up working with some small-town bootleggers and started new business. And this new job brought good money along with some unattended notoriety. George would end up getting arrested multiple times for illegal trafficking. And after that, he ended up deciding to go west with his new girlfriend. During the time, he would start going by the alias of George R. Kelly as an attempt to preserve the name of his family, who was more respected and had an upstanding background. During the late 1920s, he would earn a reputation as a seasoned gangster, having weathered many arrests and jail sentences for smuggling liquor. By the time he would finish his most recent sentence in New Mexico State Penitentiary, he would end up moving to Oklahoma and starting to work with a bootlegger named Steve Anderson. Kelly would end up falling in love with his mistress, Catherine Thorne, who in her own right was an experienced criminal also, earning multiple charges for things from robbery to prostitution. Class act. Now, the thing about Catherine Thorne was she had previously been married twice, with her second husband also being a bootlegger, who was found shot to death. And while it was officially ruled as a suicide, many people, including the investigators, believed that she had done it, especially considering the fact that a few days before, she had been overheard telling a gas station attendant that she was going to kill Charlie Thorne. But I guess George was able to overlook that because him and Catherine would end up being inseparable and get married in September of 1930. Catherine's influence began to slowly start taking a hold on George, as his crime sprees would earn him the title of Public Enemy Number 1. And at this time, she decided to go get him a gift. She would end up giving him a machine gun and very much pushed him to learn how to use it. Until one point, he became very proficient in the machine gun. It was said that Thorne had a very good talent for marketing, and she put it to good use as she promoted her husband to the criminal underground. She was known to take some of the spent bullet casings that he would use and distribute them around at multiple drinking clubs as souvenirs for her husband, George Machine Gun Kelly. Many historians, as well as inmates with Kelly, believe that Catherine was the creator behind the Machine Gun Kelly image, and as well as being the mastermind behind a series of small bank robberies that he would end up doing in Texas and Mississippi during the time. And in 1933, the FBI started putting up wanted posters of Kelly, describing him as an expert machine gunner, which unsurprisingly caused panic among the public and helped further cement his legacy. In July of 1933, Catherine and Kelly plotted a scheme to kidnap a wealthy businessman named Charles Urschel. With Kelly carrying his trademark machine gun and two other associates carrying pistols, they would enter his mansion in Oklahoma City. This occurred while the Urschels were playing a game of bridge with friends. And when Kelly stormed in, he immediately grabbed everyone's attention by threatening to blow everyone's heads off. Now, they end up taking the hostages, who were also non-cooperative, which meant they were unable to determine which one was Charles Urschel. I mean, I guess they decided not to look at a picture before they raided, but ultimately, they would end up grabbing the two men who they believed was one of Charles Urschel, put a tarp over them, force them into a car, and then they ultimately ended up searching the bodies for ID. When they found the ID of his friend, a man named Walter Jarrett, they robbed him of $51 and left him on the side of the road, which $51 in 1933 kind of equivalates to $1,200 today. So, I mean, guy was holding money right there. But regardless, Urschel was then taken and held in a ranch in Texas, while the self-proclaimed Kelly gang made demands for a $200,000 ransom, which in today's money translates to over $4.8 million. A family friend of the Urschels named E.E. Kirkpatrick made the arrangements to deliver the ransom in $20 bills. He would end up delivering it near the LaSalle Hotel in Kansas City on July 30th. This ended the entire thing. Now, the next day, they would end up releasing Urschel near Norman, Oklahoma, where he would then go into a restaurant and call for a cab. Now, the thing about Urschel was that he was very sharp, and even though he was blindfolded, he managed to have everything planned out. He left fingerprints everywhere. He was counting steps in various locations, and he even made sure that every sound he heard was cataloged in his head, to the point where all of this became crucial information during the FBI's investigation. After the gang split the money, Catherine and Kelly then decided to start state hopping in an attempt to stay ahead of the FBI. And it was working until the information that Urschel provided helped the FBI track them down to a ranch where they ended up finding one of the accomplices. They also found a lot of the money that was used for the ransom, which had traceable serial numbers. And once they found that, they were positive that they found that the person responsible for the kidnapping was George Kelly. George and Catherine bounced around a bunch of states, making Chicago their main hub. And during this time, they were also dyeing their hair in order to conceal their identities while enjoying the money that they made. But after a couple of weeks, they then ended up going back to Memphis and staying with a longtime friend named John Titchener. And on the morning of September 26, 1933, Memphis police, alongside of FBI agents, would surround the house and make violent entry. It was said that George responded with the phrase, "G-men, please don't shoot," since Kelly was found badly hungover from a night of heavy drinking, and Catherine was still sleeping in the bed. All in all, they were caught, rounded up, and expedited back to Oklahoma City, where they were both charged and given life sentences each. Everyone would ultimately be charged who was involved with the kidnapping, and out of everyone charged, there were 6 life sentences issued. Kelly was sent to Leavenworth Prison in Kansas, while Catherine was sent to a federal prison in Cincinnati. Now, during this time, Kelly was pretty arrogant, bragging to the press that he was going to break out Catherine, and they were going to spend Christmas together. Now, as you could see, they then started taking these accusations seriously. At this point, they ended up grabbing him and 2 of his other associates and sending him off to Alcatraz. And in September 4th of 1934, they would be among the first group of prisoners, with Kelly being known as AZ number 117. While in Alcatraz, Kelly was constantly boasting about several robberies and murders that he never even committed. Although this was said to have annoyed a lot of the other prisoners, the warden seemed to say that he was a model inmate. Most of his life in Alcatraz was largely uneventful. He took up a job as an altar boy with the prison chapel, worked in the laundry, and held an administrative role in the industry's office for a long period of time, with most of it being served out quietly. The warden would make statements that Kelly would be very depressed when reading mail from family members, but he would rarely fail to meet his quota of letters that he could send. And he seemed to feel remorse for the crimes he committed, while also feeling that his wife and other accomplices were treated too harshly. George Kelly would be transferred back to Leavenworth in 1951, where he would die 3 years later due to a heart attack on July 18th, 1954, on his 59th birthday. His wife Catherine would be released 4 years later in 1958 and would get a job in Oklahoma at a hospital as a bookkeeper. So, moral of the story, always practice good hygiene and marketing works.